Hal Rosen here with Linda McKnight.
Good morning.
For those now on, we're going to have a introduction or a few comments from our sponsor. Ray Willcocks is on with us. We're up to 26 participants now, Ray.
Oh, outstanding.
We'll get a lot more. If you want to wait, we can wait a minute or so.
No, I can start now. First off, I want to thank everybody for logging in to the webinar to learn what needs to be done. Hopefully, a lot of you are regional reps and you're logging on to better understand how to get the packages through to Hal and Linda. Last year, the packages were a lot better, probably some of the best we've ever seen, thanks to the dedicated work by the regional reps. So I thank you for that. If you are one of the people that are going to be submitting this year, or you're having somebody submit for you, I'm glad you're on the webinar because there's a lot of good information being passed on by Hal and Linda. So listen very carefully to it. I urge you to do that. I used to listen in on all of these every chance I could, and I learned something new every time I did. So again, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And Hal, I'll let you take over because I got to get back to driving.
All right, Ray. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Ray. Ray was on the review committee last year, which I think was a good experience. Not only was he a great contributor, but it gave him an inside, in-depth idea of how the review process works. And now, of course, he's taken on the chair of the Academy, which, along with the national president, have the final approval authority of new fellows. Our committee makes recommendations. The chair of the Academy and the president of the National Society review the recommendations and approve. So we lost Ray from the review committee. Anyway, having said that, you've got myself, and I chair the review committee. Linda has been on the review committee for...
Wasn't I born here?
Linda was served as chair of the Academy for 2 years.
Yes.
And then I think you came to the review committee.
Right after that.
Linda keeps me on the straight and narrow and has great insight to what works and what doesn't work with the nominations. But anyway, we're presenting this not to listen to ourselves talk, but to give you all a little guidance and to answer your questions. So if any of you has a question, bring it up the moment you think of it, interrupt us. I would ask that you give us your name, and we'll go from there. We probably, as Ray mentioned, likely have some RVP point of contacts on the phone with us who are going to be reviewing nominations. Some of you may have had more experience with it, others less. But if you have questions too, ask your questions while we're going through this. We also have some members of the review committee or the past review committees who I expect are on the phone with us. Folks, you too can interrupt or add your comments, your words of wisdom to everybody here. So I think with that, we'll go to the slides. Hopefully most of you have access or have seen the slides, the PowerPoint slides. One of the first ones is the calendar. And we're not going to read through all these slides. That would take us way too long, and you don't need us to do that. But look at the calendar. The regional points of contact with the Academy are to receive drafts of nominations. And what they should do with them is look at them and see if they think the nominee really does have the credentials or not. But also, maybe more importantly, review them in detail and provide the nominator's comments. And that process is supposed to be completed by September 1, leaving everybody a month to get the nominations into society headquarters. We'll skip through the rest of the calendar, except that the final approvals are to be made by the end of, the end of November, right around Thanksgiving time is normally when it falls. And then, of course, the investiture is on March 7th. And we would like, I don't know what the correct phrase is, everybody that's selected to be at the investiture. On the overview, you'll see we have a scoring system. The scoring system, and I'm going to jump around here, the scoring system is not a be-all, end-all. Am I on your toes?
No.
The scoring system is not a be-all, end-all. We score the nominations. There's a minimum score requirement of 70. We use a 100-point scoring system. But that doesn't mean anybody that scores 70 or above is going to be approved. Nominations must meet the basic criteria of showing dedicated and outstanding service to the society and separately, but not really mutually exclusively, to the engineering profession. And we score, but then we have a review meeting and go back to, well, here we have the scores, but have that basic criteria been met of showing dedicated and outstanding service to society and profession? And that all comes from the Society's Constitution, Article 3, Paragraph 3. In governance hierarchy, the Society Constitution is going to be controlling internally. We have bylaws that implement the Society Constitution, but the Society Constitution, which gives some definition of the requirements for fellow, have to be met. So, next slide is a repeat of what the Constitution said, basically. You have to have a 10-year membership requirement to be nominated. And we were once asked, well, what if they're nominated now with only 9 years and 7 months, but by the time we get around to making recommendations and so forth, it's already 10 years. But we concluded that the Constitution requires that the nominee be a 10-year member before they're even nominated. Let's see. The next slide, are we on number 6? That gives you some of our process, the review committee's process. You can read all that yourselves. Let's get to the criteria, which are really the scoring criteria that we use. Linda, you want to go?
Yeah. We want to talk about the general criteria, and it's very important because once you get into writing this, lots of times you kind of lose your place, and you begin, I call it meandering, and you really do need to stay focused. The minimum of 10 years is a requirement. We do see nominations for folks that have just barely been in 10 years. And frankly, if your nominee or you fall into that category, you really need to look carefully at the full scope of all criteria and be sure that you can effectively demonstrate the dedicated and outstanding service to SAME and the engineering community. We have found in most cases the folks that have been in that minimum of 10 years, while they may have been living, eating, and drinking SAME at every time an SAME door opened, sometimes they are not as mature in their contributions to their work environment, to their engineering community, which is very broad, as the slide states. For instance, for myself, I have been always in the business side of the industry and in business development and strategy. There's research and development, there's education, there's planning and design, as well as what some folks like to say, your hardcore engineers. So you need to really look at that and use it to build. If you think you fall short, work with some folks, ask some questions of the SEME membership, but be sure that you can demonstrate those strengths across both areas. One of the other bullets that are on there is having served in a leadership position, and as you'll notice, it says post-regional and or national level. So it's not like you have to have held everything at every level, but it is much more than being there when they open the doors. It's your contribution, how you've helped your post, your region, or some national committee or council to grow the organization, to grow SAME. So you really need to think hard about meeting those particular criteria, and it'll take you a long way. If we can go to slide 8. The first bullet is the one I love the most, and then there's a little bit of the last one I'll share with you. The first line, nominations must clearly and concisely convey the contributions in both of the service areas. We're not looking for an epistle, the draft of a new novel. We are simply looking for facts, okay? Facts that you can substantiate, not broad generalities, not where you were subordinate to everything that you talk about, but what was your, not that that's not important to be part of the team, but what specifically was your focus that helped move that along? The last, I think, the other thing to highlight on this particular slide is the nomination and selection committee will not add information or make assumptions about the nominee. It is so important that you tell us on the page specifics. As I said, again, facts. Hal mentioned that when the committee meets, after all the scores are in, we go back and we look at each one, and over the course of all the evaluators, how we looked at that. And it's to get the breadth of the hows and whys, but it is not to say, I know that guy worked on this project and it was really cool. And my response is, well, if it was that cool, why didn't he or she put it in put it in to be scored? Okay? And if you want to go to slide 9, I'll flip it back to Hal.
You can, but back on slide 8 a minute. The middle bullet is interesting. We were talking about general criteria, and again, back to dedicated and outstanding service to society and to the engineering profession. The middle bullet really is focused on outstanding service to the engineering profession. And that's a little bit difficult to explain, but the fact that somebody was the program manager for a $100 million program, I mean, that's nice to know, but what the reviewers will want to know is, well, what did that individual do in that role that made it outstanding service in managing that program? So there are some examples given in that bullet, and they're also in the instructions to the nominations, where the reviewers will look to what did that person do to stretch the limits in their career, in their profession. Not just that they got promoted, but what did they do that makes it outstanding service? That's important. And actually, we do the same thing when we look at service to the society. Yes, a lot of people have served as post-president, but what did they really do in that role that was outstanding on behalf of the post or outstanding on behalf of the society? We want to know. We don't have a checklist for what it takes to be a society fellow. Last year, we had a number of nominees that were post presidents, very recently post presidents, but we are going to look, as we always do, what did they do? How successful was the post, but how successful were they in managing and leading that post to the post achievements? That's all general criteria. Linda was going to pass it back to me, getting to the scoring on slide 9. You'll see it's sort of slanted more in the weight of it, more toward service to society. We have 10 points for society. Leadership positions, 45 points for outstanding service. That's already 55 points, leaning toward the society side. And then awards and honors covers service to society and service engineering profession. So you could arguably say that 60% of the 60 points lean toward service to society, maybe 40 lean toward service to profession. I say that, but do not be misled into thinking service to profession is not as important as service to society and demonstrating the outstanding service. Because in the end, when we review, we actually say that within the review meeting, okay, has this person shown enough dedicated and outstanding service to the society, one, and then we say it again. Have they done that, enough of a showing of service to the profession? Got to get over both hurdles.
We also have a question that just came in through the Q&A box.
Okay.
It says, post president oversaw the accomplishment, et cetera, et cetera. Does this mean the specific requirement? I don't think so. Does this meet the specific?
You know, it's an interesting question. You know, the post president does a lot of overseeing, but the reviewers want to know, what did the post president really do? Did the post president rely on his committee members to really make the post successful? We really want to know, and I think I'm right, that the post president had his hand stirred the pot.
I think influence would be a good word to apply. That you were kind of, the post president was more or less the rudder, the leader. And what we always talk about innovation, influence, that type thing. What kind of hurdles did the post or a committee have, and the president came through and worked with the team to overcome that?
It's easier to see in service to profession, but it also, that same point applies there too. It's nice to know that the company did some great things, but we really want to know, what did the nominee really do? That should be considered outstanding service, not the sustaining member or a group of people. So you see the points. Do I do 10? Down to
You do 10.
slide 10. It's almost a repeat. It's just highlighting the scoring criteria for us. You'll notice the word dedicated emboldened or outstanding in red. There's a reason for that. Normally, when nominees were not approved, our past history was because they didn't get over the hurdle of outstanding service on both number 2 and number 3. Last year, we had an interesting discussion, nominations of people that were clearly 10-year members of the society, and they had held important offices in their posts, but only for, I'll use the word abbreviated, periods of time.
Right.
And for me, that kicked in the importance of the word dedicated. Dedicated service, the reviewers had a difficult time with those nominations, and they really were not approved or recommended for approval. So this time we are highlighting that dedicated requirement. Don't come in with nominees that have been very actively involved with your post for 3 years. I don't think that's going to cut it. And frankly, a lot of them may have been on committees previously, but it just wasn't highlighted to us. And as Linda explained, we don't take into consideration things that are not in the nomination package. We can't. So I think that's 10, slide 10. I have the format. I don't know that I need to say much about the format of the nomination form that starts on page 11. That's about the nominee. Linda, you've got 12.
I've got 12. Talking specifically about the leadership, SAMI leadership positions, the first criteria, please, please, please notice the last sentence in that, list only. We simply need you to list the positions and the dates and at what level they were held in chronological order. List only. We will still get packages that have 3 or 4 pages dedicated to this first criteria. How the linkage from criteria 1 feeds into criteria 2 is you provide the meat, the facts for those positions. And you may have a position over a period of time where you were deployed or you were, on a project that was not from a good place and you were not as involved in that particular position, but we look at the leadership positions in total. And there is a listing in A for the different types of involvement, what we think should be considered. We also get packages that people break this out and try to write to each one. That is not a requirement. Look at that list, highlight what you know you've done, and then think about what it meant to the betterment or an improvement or something unique that was covered. B, we added this last year to close with an explanation in the nominee's own words why the achievements to SAME are considered dedicated and outstanding, and I think Hal did a good job covering that. The problem is when it was a year here, 10 years later there were 2 years, and for the last 3 years they've been just, very engaged. That's not really, that from a fellow standpoint does not demonstrate dedicated and outstanding commitment and service. We also added C, which is what do you plan to do? What does a nominee expect to do if they become a fellow? Do you have insights for things to take on? What is it you personally as well as professionally want to contribute to SAMI's future and growth? And all of this has to be covered in 1,600 words or less, and they give you a font size restriction. Please pay attention to that. And I think like most people who write, don't try to start, don't keep watching it at 16, but write it, and then look where you can be back to that succinct, concise. Say the words, get rid of all the adverbs and adjectives. What did you do? Facts, please. I'll go ahead and do 13 as well. This is the outstanding service to engineering, criteria 3. And again, it asks you to list in chronological order the positions that you've held for the past 10 years. And then for those positions, again, you have a list of the type things that we've seen in the past or that we are looking for. Again, I stress, find those things that are representative of your experience. You do not have to address each one of them, and be concise and provide facts. Generalities, broad brush statements are what usually cripple nomination package, because there's nothing specific. You make a broad statement, and there's nothing for the committee to actually look at to score.
What question?
Okay.
We're reviewing questions as they come in, so bear with us.
All right, so it says additional, more specific guidance as to what threshold the committee feels outstanding service to the engineering community needs to be provided, if at all, will be recognized as not possible. Specific examples of what accomplishments would be recognized as outstanding would serve to encourage potential candidates that can provide demonstrable evidence of such level of accomplishment to seek nomination as a fellow. The number of nominees judged to not have demonstrated such evidence recently is discouraging some candidates from investing the time to submit. Example just mentioned about a program manager is a good one, but exactly what type of thing would make that very significant professional responsibility and accomplishment be viewed as outstanding to the panel? For instance, is growth of revenue or staffing as a result of the candidate's effort evidence of outstanding contribution or profitability results? In private industry, it is challenging to know exactly what is good enough.
I'd like to take a shot and let Hal add. Let's take a program management or project management position where it's a first-time event, where something was created, whether it's a technology or a tool, something where speaking of revenue and performance, it was ahead of schedule, under budget, that it brought a new dimension to engineering or science, crack that nut, if you will, on something that was very difficult. To me, because someone managed a billion-dollar construction job, that's huge, but a lot of people do that, but what did this person think about your challenges and what you did for that client or for the profession? How you want to take it? That's from my side.
I'm thinking the same thing. What I tend to look at in reviewing nominations is what were the challenges of the job, or if you wanted to take a program or a project, what were the challenges of this project?
Right.
And every project has its challenges.
Sure.
So, what were the challenges? What was done by the program manager, project manager to address those challenges? How successful was he or she in addressing them? So it gets to the success of the project or the program itself, but the individual challenges that had to be met. And actually, this also applies in talking about in the narratives about service to the society. Somebody comes in and takes on post-presidency. What challenges was that post-president faced with in taking on that position? What needed to be improved or should have been focused on? Or did this post-president focus on when taking over the post? And how did he deal with the challenges? Sometimes there will be unique solutions, and that's probably more on the engineering side than it is on the SAME side, but there will be unique solutions developed. That's the kind of thing the reviewers really take to.
And it doesn't, the thing I want to stress is you don't have to have 20 of those.
No.
If you have an iconic project that made a huge difference in the way a contaminant was handled, or a difference in a design that increased the ability to sustain seismic. You don't have to be getting the Medal of Honor or the merit whatever for engineering or for water resources. What it is you had a project and you supported the community, the customer. I'm frankly not as interested when I review that you increase the company's revenue by X%. I'm looking at the service for the technical capabilities for whatever you're in, whether it's education, business development, water sciences or earth sciences, GIS. Use something for the first time, or use something that's been there forever, but you put a new twist on it. And it's now standard operating procedure in accounting, in the way something is managed in the Corps of Engineers, or it's now the blue book for something on a water resource project. I think we're beating it to death. I'd like to know if the author of that feels that this has helped frame what we're looking for. Okay, he says thank you, or he or she says thank you for your response. Okay, all right, great, great. Don't leave this seminar wondering about something is the other thing I would ask you all to do.
But if you do leave and have more questions, do send your questions to Kathy Off at koff@same.org, and she'll get them to us, and we can continue this somehow for you. We want to help with the nominations.
Okay, one more thing on slide 13, I would be remiss to say the same efforts in considering that closing about dedicated and outstanding, and it's 1,200 words. At the bottom of that page, awards and citations is your criteria for, and again, it's a list. We really don't need replications of publications and articles. It is a list of SAMI, community service, professional service, awards and honors, and we do add provide the name and description of the award and what the nominee did to get it. Again, it can be very straightforward, the name and what specifically, just in a few sentences, took your actions and raised them to the point that you were recognized from whomever for that action. That's very important because a lot of people, there's quite a diversity among the nominators and certainly wide diversity among the reviewers and wide diversity with the nominee. And something that in the architecture world that means you're the best thing since fresh bread does not ring to my ear that way unless I understand, and I don't need the history of it, just why it's important. My next slide is 14, and then I'll turn it back over to Hal. This is your citation for the investiture ceremony brochure. It's 200 words or less. And it should be the heart of what you have done and have included in your package. And then the nominator, I don't think we need to say much about the nominator information, only to remind folks a society fellow, only a society fellow may nominate. Before I pass it back to Hal for endorsement information, I do want to state something that the entire committee has talked about in the write-ups, in the taking your list and then talking about your demonstrating your experience. We do not want excerpts from a past proposal or from your business development group. We want specifics, much shorter and to the point, and I think that is a really strong package. Some of the strongest packages we've seen have had the fewest pages. Having said that, some of the weakest have also had 2 pages, and that's not going to cut it, because, again, it was broad statements versus facts and substantiation. and I've talked too long, so Hal, go.
No, you haven't, Linda. A few comments on what Linda just covered. The word limitations are really for you, not for the reviewers. They're designed to cause focus. The other thing I might say about the numbers, I mean, if we have a 1,600 word limitation and somebody comes in with 1,650 words, nobody's going to be bothered by that, but don't come in with 3,000 words. Jim made that point.
Yep. He said award, especially military, only lists the title. Example would be a meritorious service medal or a complete description of the award. It gets very wordy and laborious to read. I suggest a very brief summary, at most a sentence or two, in lieu of a complete description.
Exactly.
That's true,
yes.
Because we have people on the committee that can explain to others what these awards are. And we have the services, all services, normally all of our services are covered on the review committee.
It's not so much, I think the same applies to community and professional awards. That's where, when you get to the committee, we don't always know, but very, very good point, Jim. Not the excerpt from the manual, but just briefly what it is. Thank you.
All right, I'm picking up on slide 15, endorsements. It's not really too complicated. A nomination must be submitted by a fellow. All right, no exceptions. Endorsement, and we don't count the nomination or the nominee anymore. We once did. We don't count them as an endorser or as an endorsement. So, aside from the nominator, each nomination must have 4 additional endorsements by 4 separate additional people and separate from the nominator. 2 of those 4 must be from fellows. So we got the fellow we have a fellow nominator. We have 4 additional endorsements, an additional to the nominator. 2 of those must be of fellows. We require the post president endorsement. We require the RVP endorsement. It does happen, not infrequently, that the president is the nominee or the RVP is the nominee. So we don't mean to rule them out by strict application of these rules. So find another post officer to endorse for the post president, or find an assistant RVP or the previous RVP to endorse for the RVP who happens to be a nominee. We like the endorsements to fill in more information because I know the reviewers, they read them. Often we get a form endorsement letter. All four endorsements look alike. The nomination can get better benefit from endorsements from individuals that really work in the past, either professionally or within SAME, that knows has firsthand knowledge to share, to bring to the review committee.
Right, substantiation of some of the things that you put in your application. They were there with you, either working with you or managing you when that happened. So those always add value to the package.
They add value. You can make the endorsements work for you or work for the nomination. We have the RVP. You probably noticed it last year, maybe 2 years. The RVP endorsement comes in separately. There was the thought that because the packages all came in with the endorsements, the RVP didn't express their full thoughts didn't want to pour cold water on a nominee or a nomination. They probably still don't, even with the RVP sending in their separate endorsement, but that is why that came about, and that is why the RVP endorsement is not a part of the form. It gets electronically submitted to headquarters.
Okay, back to me, slide 18. This is putting on one page in one place, and I've had people tell me they pull this out to remind them. These are your word limitations, and I think Hal used an excellent word when he said focus. That's that's the frame of mind you need to be in when each one of these are developed. If you go to 19, the review process, the nominations checked by headquarters. They do a great job for this. Before it comes to committee, they verify the years of membership, that they're current, that a nominator is a fellow, and that all of the correct endorsements are in the package, because we have had some fall off, attached two of the same, et cetera, and headquarters works with us to help with that, and it's much appreciated. So QC is a good thing for you guys and gals as you look at these packages. Okay, how about you for 20?
I can't say enough about headquarters and the support they give us. But that's a list of the things they do, and if any of you have any questions about whether something was received, about whether something is required, about something makes sense to you, your point of contact and our point of contact as with the review committee, the academy, is with Kathy Off.
Okay.
So you really don't hesitate. We'll load up her inbox for her, but don't hesitate to go to her with any question you may have along the way.
Yeah, I think Jim's got a couple of points.
All right. Endorsements.
Endorsements. Electronic submission has caused confusion. Emphasize each endorsement is submitted individually by clicking on endorsement. Electronic submission has each endorsee merely completes the block and presses submit.
I think they're uploaded. I think the way it works, and since I haven't ever submitted a nomination, but you upload the endorsement into the nomination form.
Yeah.
Except for the RVP.
Except for the RVP. So there should be 3 endorsements uploaded along with the nomination form, and then hit submit. And everything should come in. It complicates things if things come in pieces somehow. I hope that's Jim's point. The review committee, I'm supposed to be on slide number 20.
Yes.
Let's see. All review committee members review every nomination. We don't divide them up. We've got 8 people on the committee and 80 nominations. We don't each take 10. We each take every one of them and review them and score them. And every one of the review committee members participates in reaching a recommendation on each and every nomination. So we do the scoring. We submit the scores to headquarters, and they prepare a master score sheet for us, another one of their headquarters activities. And then we have a deliberation meeting of all review committee members. And I would say we probably spend 90% of our time reviewing nominations that end up not being recommended.
Yep.
Because we don't like to do that. We don't like to reach that conclusion, I don't think. And we spend our time, the easy ones, there are a lot of easy ones for us, let me put it that way.
They're very specific, they're straightforward, you can read it.
Yeah.
Yes, there you go. I would say that a lot of the time we spend, and this credit is to how the committee invests in making supportive and helpful comments on the weaknesses and the strengths, not just one or the other, in the individual packages, so that if there's a question or someone wants to ask, Hal can provide that feedback that we've all contributed to. And that's something I don't think a lot of organizations do. So.
Yeah, and then the third to the last bullet on that slide, number 20, I'll say it again, recommendations are based on, in the end, overall outstanding service to the society and to the engineering community or profession. How we determine, sometimes we vote, sometimes we don't even need a vote, and sometimes we have very close calls, and sometimes, and by our deliberations, people change their views. Mm-hmm. It's a good process, but it makes us spend a lot of focus, time. We're glad to do it. And once we're done, we make our recommendations to the chair of the academy and to the National Society president. I go first to the chair of the academy, not both at the same time, although I could. We have a question.
Yep, Jim, just going back to the endorsement, he says endorsees are geographically dispersed. How can it be all inclusive in a single nomination? I'm guessing he means that the endorsee gives their endorsement to the nominee, who then uploads it, and the only exception of that is RVP.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
So the nominee gets all the endorsements. All the other endorsees except for the RVP are giving their endorsements to the nominee.
Right. To the nominator.
Yeah.
Yeah, the nominator collects all of the endorsements.
It's one point of contact.
They can come from all over the world.
Yeah.
And then there was another question, as regional AOS POCs, who do we reach out to if we have questions or need advice?
I would suggest going to Kathy first with your question, and then she can determine
who it goes
where
to.
and who to send it to. Yeah, let's keep it that way. I think we ought to keep Kathy fully engaged.
Okay. If we move, anything else, how am I getting ahead of it?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, if we move to slide 21, this is like one of those mother slides, the do's and the don'ts. We've talked about them throughout the presentation. This is, again, a punch list for you to use as you QC and evaluate and write. Again, provide a list for your elected or appointed positions, and let us know if it's an elected or appointed position. In SAME participation, we do want all positions held in the last 10 years. It shows a continuum, some of that piece of the criteria that we look for, consistent.
Let me interrupt, Linda. If someone has provided light service in the last 10 years, but previous to that 10-year period, they did provide service to the society, don't stop with the 10 years. I know we say that, but it might bolster the nomination. We're not going to throw it out if somebody talks about something that was done 15 years ago. It may not get the weight.
It adds value, but if that was the last big thing in the last 10 years or not as much contribution, it can be added value. It does not usurp the 10 years of current participation. Is that a fair way to say it?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We put the dates for each position. I already mentioned the elected and appointed. And please do not expect any credit for things you have not listed and substantiated. And don't list anything, Hal just qualified that a little bit. So, and I think you got the gist of what we're saying. We need to look at that, Hal, going forward. Okay, let's go to 22. Again, restating this is 45% of your evaluations. That first bullet, when you line out those positions in the last 10 years, or if it's slightly different than 10, link the facts to that, what qualified it as outstanding. Avoid generalities, be responsive, and use the examples we talked about. Provide the big picture for why your participation in your application demonstrates dedicated and outstanding, and remember to watch your word limits. Going on to 23, and I think I just took your slide now, 22.
Well, you did. Well, that's good, Linda.
Yeah, okay, I just took our slide. So let's move on to my slide, which is 23, and that's where I stop. Engineering profession, the same deal. Do identify positions during the last 10 years. It shows our growth. You notice this one does not say all, because in 10 years, an engineer may, I think you have to look at what it is in the most representative to be presented. If you want to put all 10, that's fine. It's up to you, but you need to be able to write to them. The narrative setting for factual information. Go back and look at your criteria 3, as I said, which ones of those, and there could be others. Which one apply to your situation? Be sure to call out why it's outstanding, unique, creative. It has developed a life of its own because of your input and your application of technique, technology, practice. It's not a writing contest. It doesn't have to be long. It just needs to be specific. Avoid generalities. And watch the word limitations on that and focus. And how? I'm not going to steal your next slide. 24.
And I was hoping you would. On 24 talks about awards and honors, 10%. And we already mentioned from Jim Donahue's suggestion, Jim's been on the review committee for many, many years. Military awards and honors, you can just tell us what they are, but if it's particularly a community service award or a company award, give us some words that tell us what it is and why you were selected, so we can understand it a bit. That helps. 25.
All right. This is your summary, one of the slides on summary and highlights. Development, the nominee involvement in the package is absolutely essential. It doesn't take to go through one of these in the first page to understand that it was written by someone else with great admiration and confidence in the nominee, but there's no way they can give us the facts and substantiation that we need. Start early, because you're going to go through iteration. I don't think I've ever seen one that they wrote and it came in. Well, maybe, but I can tell you it didn't go anywhere after it came in. Details, qualitative facts, no generalities, word limits, and address. Be sure you go back and check yourself and that you've addressed the criteria that supports your experience. Nomination 26, the emphasis, there's more emphasis on SAM with the scoring as Hal said, but that by no means it's more important than it has to be a good score on each one, and we consistently see very few people fail on both sides or come up short on both sides, but there's no real rating that we can tell you one way or another. It's just the individual experience, and so many times we look at it and we just grimace and say, it's the way it's written. We just don't have the facts. We had to have done, but we don't have the facts. I go back to the writing competition. Stick to be concise and the word limitation. And back to you, Hal, on 27.
We have 4 slides on summary and highlights. I would suggest to anybody putting a nomination together, just remember 3 words. I'm oversimplifying it, but dedicated, outstanding, and the word focus. And focus really is focus on dedicated and outstanding. And we had a very good question about how do you demonstrate outstanding service to the profession. We had a good discussion about that. But if you can remember when you're writing up or if you're a reviewer reviewing a nomination, keep thinking, is this dedicated? Does this show dedicated service? Does this show outstanding service? Is the write-up focused? Because if it's not focused, it's not going to do well with the reviewers. That's my whole summary of 4 pages of slides. And that's the last slide. The next slide says questions, I think. I'll cover that one then. Anybody else have any questions or any more questions up there?
The PowerPoint will be available on the website if you go to the SAME website /AOS. That's the Academy of Fellows page. At the bottom of that page, there's a link that says how to nominate a fellow. If you click on that link, it takes you to the nomination page, and that is where the slides and the audio will be linked.
Any other questions up there? Let's see.
While y'all are thinking about another question to ask, I have one more comment. We score these in, if you will, 2 areas. And what we see frequently when we read one and then go to read the other, there's cross-pollination. That we end up seeing SAME kudos in the engineering, which actually wasn't in the SAME side. So I think when you proof it and you evaluate it on your own, this is for nominator, nominee, reviewer, that you read it about SAME, and then you go and look at take the next criteria and read that as if they were 2 separate documents. I just think that would help you. It would help you strengthen. That's it for me.
Yeah, I agree with that, Linda. We read these packages, and they are packages, from corner to corner, front to back, no matter, and including the endorsements, no matter where the words are, to give benefit of doubt when we can, where we can. But the better prepared the nomination packages are, the better the odds, let's put it that way, of being successful with the nomination. For me, that closes it. We have no more questions. And so we'll close out. Thank all of you for your patience with us and your diligence. Hopefully we've been helpful to all of you.
Thank you and good luck.